Have you ever actually stopped to think about what keeps your body functioning perfectly? I mean, balancing your temperature, your energy levels, even your sleep cycle, without you having to consciously think about it for even a single second. Well, welcome to this explainer on the endocrine system. We're going to map out the body's master control network. It's basically this invisible web of communication that essentially dictates how you experience the entire world. All right, so here's the game plan for this explainer. We'll start by meeting the system, look at the rules of the network, take a tour of the major glands, dive into the blood sugar balancing act, cover some common disorders, and finally, compare the endocrine system to the nervous system.
Okay, let's jump right into part 1. Meet the endocrine system.
To really get how this whole system works, you have to understand its ultimate goal, and that is homeostasis. That's just a fancy way of saying it's the body's ability to maintain a relatively stable internal environment. Working hand in hand with your nervous system, the endocrine system achieves this balance by releasing these chemical messengers called hormones. They travel all through your bloodstream to regulate, well, pretty much everything you can think of: growth, metabolism, blood glucose, fluid balance, how you handle stress, and even your daily circadian rhythms.
Now, you might be wondering, how do these chemical messengers actually get out into the body? So an endocrine gland, like your thyroid, releases its hormones directly into the surrounding tissue fluid and right into the bloodstream. This is completely different from an exocrine gland, like, say, your salivary glands, which release their substances through a physical duct. But here's a fun fact: some organs, like the pancreas, actually do both. It's a bit of an overachiever.
But if these hormones are just dumped right into the bloodstream, how do they know where to go? Well, they travel absolutely everywhere, but they don't affect every single cell. As this quote perfectly captures, it's just like a key fitting into a specific lock. A hormone only actually does something when it binds to a specific receptor on or inside a target cell. Once that key turns the lock, boom, it can change cellular metabolism, alter membrane transport, or literally even change gene activity.
Moving right along to Section 2, the rules of the network.
A hormone's chemical structure dictates exactly how it travels and interacts with your cells. You can think of them as falling into 3 main flavors. First, you've got peptide and protein hormones, which are basically chains of amino acids. Think stuff like insulin and growth hormone. Next up are steroid hormones. These are actually produced from cholesterol, which is kind of wild, and include cortisol and testosterone. And finally, amino acid-derived hormones are made from, you guessed it, individual amino acids, like adrenaline and melatonin.
So how does the body actually control all this? It uses something called negative feedback. It's literally a biological thermostat. Just look at this elegant little 4-step loop for thyroid regulation. The hypothalamus releases TRH, telling the pituitary to release TSH. That tells the thyroid to pump out the hormones T3 and T4. But here is the genius part. When those T3 and 4 levels get high enough in your blood, they feed back to the brain to shut off the TRH and TSH. It literally stops its own production to maintain perfect balance. Pretty amazing, right?
All right, now that we know the rules, let's jump to Section 3, a rapid-fire tour of the major glands.
Up first, right in your brain, we have the management team. The hypothalamus is essentially the CEO. It links the nervous and endocrine systems to regulate temperature, hunger, and stress. Just below it sits the pituitary gland. The anterior pituitary produces a whole suite of hormones that go out and boss other glands around. The posterior part of the pituitary doesn't actually make hormones itself. It just stores and releases hormones made by the CEO, specifically ADH for water balance and oxytocin. Moving down into the front of your neck, we find your metabolic engines. The thyroid gland pumps out T3 and T4, which regulate your overall metabolic rate, your body heat, and energy use. But tucked right behind it are 4 tiny glands called the parathyroid glands. While the thyroid manages energy, the parathyroids have a super specific job, producing parathyroid hormone, or PTH, to maintain blood calcium levels by acting on your bones and kidneys. You absolutely need that calcium for muscle contraction and nerve function.
Next, sitting right on top of your kidneys, are the adrenal glands. The outer layer, the cortex, produces cortisol for long-term stress and aldosterone to manage blood pressure. The inner layer, the medulla, releases adrenaline. You know that feeling when your heart races during a jump scare in a movie? Yep, that's the medulla dumping adrenaline straight into your blood. And speaking of daily rhythms, let's jump back to the brain for a second, to the pineal gland. When you turn off the lights tonight, your pineal gland is going to ramp up its production of melatonin, telling your body it's time to sleep.
Finally, we have the reproductive glands. The ovaries produce estrogens and progesterones, which govern female characteristics, the menstrual cycle, and pregnancy.
The testes produce testosterone, driving male characteristics, muscle and bone development, and sperm production. And remember those pituitary hormones FSH and LH we mentioned earlier? They're the ones heavily regulating both of these glands.
Just take a look at this whole lineup for a second. It gives you a great bird's-eye view of the entire network. From the hypothalamus calling the shots at the top, all the way down to the reproductive organs, every single piece has a designated purpose. It really is the ultimate blueprint for how your body sustains itself day in and day out.
Okay, so let's see this blueprint in action. Section 4, the Blood Sugar Balancing Act.
When we're talking about blood sugar, the pancreas is absolutely the star of the show. Inside the pancreas are these specific groups of endocrine cells called pancreatic islets, and they produce two incredibly important hormones, insulin and glucagon. What's super cool about this is that unlike the thyroid or the adrenals, this system doesn't need to wait for a signal from the brain. The pancreas is completely autonomous here. It acts as both the sensor and the dispatcher.
Let's break it down. Picture this. You just ate a huge meal. As your food digests, your blood glucose spikes. Almost instantly, the beta cells in the pancreas detect this sugar rush and they dispatch insulin into your bloodstream. Think of insulin as a master key that unlocks your muscle and fat cells, basically telling them, hey, take up this glucose and store it for later. And just like that, your blood glucose drops back down to a safe, normal level.
But what if you skip lunch? Your blood glucose starts to tank. This time, a different set of cells, the alpha cells, detect the drop. They release glucagon. Glucagon rushes straight to the liver and forces it to break down in stored emergency rations, which is called glycogen, turning it into fresh glucose and dumping it into the blood to keep you energized. So insulin and glucagon are constantly playing this microscopic game of tug-of-war all day long just to keep you balanced.
Which brings us to Section 5, Common Endocrine System Disorders. What happens when things go wrong?
System glitches usually happen when glands produce way too much or way too little of a hormone, or when the tissues just stop listening. Take diabetes mellitus, for example, where blood glucose stays persistently high. In type 1 diabetes, the body's immune system accidentally destroys those pancreatic beta cells, meaning little to no insulin gets made. In type 2 diabetes, the body is making insulin, but the tissues just ignore it. That's insulin resistance. The end result for both? Sky-high blood sugar, which causes intense thirst, frequent urination, profound fatigue, and super slow wound healing. Your thyroid can glitch out too. Remember, this is your metabolic engine. If you have hypothyroidism, meaning it's underactive, it's like having your foot stick on the brake. You get fatigued, you're always cold, and you might gain weight. But if you have hyperthyroidism, it's the exact opposite. The engine is flooring the gas in an anxious overdrive. You'd see rapid weight loss even if you're eating a ton, severe heat intolerance, a racing heart, and tremors.
And then we have adrenal disorders, which can really mess with how your body handles stress and fluid. Adrenal insufficiency means you don't have enough cortisol, leading to just profound weakness, low blood pressure, and weight loss. On the flip side, Cushing's syndrome is what happens when you have prolonged excessive cortisol. That leads to central weight gain, thin skin, and hypertension. Doctors usually track these dysfunctions down by taking a really careful history, asking about your sleep, weight, and mood, and by running specific blood tests to find exactly where that negative feedback loop broke.
All right, we've covered some incredible ground today. Let's wrap this explainer up with Section 6, endocrine versus nervous system.
These two master control networks govern your existence, but in totally different ways. The nervous system uses electrical signals, it's rapid, it's brief, and it's super localized, like instantly pulling your hand away from a hot stove. But the endocrine system, as we've seen, is all about playing the long game. It uses hormones in the bloodstream for gradual, widespread, and long-lasting effects, regulating your metabolism, your growth, and keeping you in homeostasis. They connect flawlessly right at the hypothalamus to keep you alive. But honestly, here's the thought I want to leave you with today. If an invisible, gradual web of chemicals dictates your energy, your sleep, your mood, and how you handle stress, how much of our daily, conscious human experience is simply the result of invisible molecules finding their perfect locks?